Thank you, Senator Inhofe. I really appreciate your statement and your support. And I certainly join in the comments and concerns that were just raised by my colleagues, Senator McCain and Senator Graham. Here's where we are. We're in this position where, frankly, as Senator McCain said, it's a charade. We're both parties are acting out this play where we're going to have one vote on the Democratic alternative that's going to fail. We're going to have another vote on one Republican alternative that's going to fail. And so I put pen to paper and came up with some other ways to cut spending that comes up to about $250 billion in savings over the next 10 years to address sequester and also to have an alternative because I believe that the American people see through this charade of what's going to happen today, and that ultimately, that as the prior speakers have said, the sequester was set up to be resolved in a way where we had alternative savings that did not undermine our national security and some of the core services that could be put at risk in the way that the sequester is structured. And I firmly believe that when you look at what has happened here, this bill was ill-conceived from the beginning. I didn't support it. I didn't vote for it. And one of the fundamental problems with it is it was a kick the can down the road exercise where we gave our responsibility to find the $1.2 trillion in saving, the sequester that was set up to a super committee rather than us doing our job in budgeting and prioritizing the entire Senate and the Budget Committee. So stepping back, that is what has led us here. But I'm also disappointed in my Republican colleagues. That's why I offered an alternative of spending cuts, because it seems to me that the way this is structured, we've already taken $487 billion in reductions to our defense. I serve on the Senate Armed Services Committee. I've been listening for a year on that committee to our military leaders at every single level, asking them about the sequester, and from the highest leaders, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff to the Secretary of Defense, we've heard things like we're going to shoot ourselves in the head, we're going to hollow out our force, America will no longer be a global power, General Dempsey once told us, as a result of sequestration. This morning we had leaders of our military before the Armed Services Committee, and I asked Assistant Secretary Estevez, if we go with a flexibility approach, does this address the impact on our national security? In other words, will this address making sure that we can still meet the needs of our national security at a time, let's not forget, at a time when Iran is marching toward a nuclear weapon, when we have conflict in Syria, when we are still at war. And by the way, this sequester, the way it impacts the Department of Defense, our war funding was not exempt from the sequester. Over 50% of spending, as this was set up from the beginning, was exempt from the sequester, which is, of course, no way to find savings throughout the whole government, but we didn't exempt the war funding. And so at a time of war, I asked the Assistant Secretary, does the flexibility solve the problem to our national security? And he said, certainly flexibility will help us deal with it, but it will not solve the problem in terms of our national security. And so that's why I decided to come up with some alternative savings. My proposal will not get a vote today, and I think it's a time when, frankly, we should bring more ideas to the floor, not less ideas, and really debating this vigorously in the United States Senate, instead of where we are right now, which is really, I think it is a charade, that we're going to have one vote and another vote, and we're all going to get into our sides and say, okay, American people, even though we know that there are real risks, particularly to the safety of this country, that we should be addressing, that I believe we can. From my perspective, I believe we can address it through alternative spending cuts. And through all of this, we have the President of the United States. He has called leaders of both parties tomorrow to the White House. I've spent a year working on this issue. He was in the Newport News shipyard the other day. We were there in July talking about the impact on that shipyard. We traveled to states around the country, to military facilities, to tell them and to talk with the people there at those facilities about the impact of sequester. And so I think that the president should have been on this much sooner. And so now it is time for his leadership as the Commander-in-Chief, leadership that I think this summer when we were all talking about it, we could have been in a position to try to resolve it then, rather than continuing to be at these crisis moments that we find ourselves in this Senate. So where I am left on all this is that we owe it to our men and women in uniform to find alternative ways to save the money, still protecting our national security, and also, just so people understand how this plays out, the way the cuts are taken in 13 during a shorter period, not a full period, OMB has estimated on the defense end it's about 13% on top of the $487 billion in reductions. On the non-defense spending, it's about 9% over the additional $487 billion. And so I would just simply ask that I think it's time for us to stop the charade, and it is my hope that we actually get down to resolving this in a responsible way for our country. And that's why I put pen to paper, and people can be critical of my proposal. But I think that now is the time when we should have a vote on every proposal, and we should have every idea come to the table, because it is a time to stop the charade, and it's time to solve this problem, to make sure that we protect our country at a very dangerous time. And I will continue to work to do that for our country. I think we can do it still addressing our deficits, still with savings, but we certainly need to do it, and having the charade vote we're going to have today won't solve it, and the American people deserve better, and we should be giving them better and solving this. So I thank you, Mr. President, for giving me the time here.